Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about fundamentals. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, Frederick, what are some things that took you time to figure out about programming that are fundamental to a programmer's success? Well, I would say that the most fundamental thing that took me time to understand was how everything fits together. And I'm not necessarily talking about design patterns here, but yes, design patterns would be an example of something like that, because as a lot of enthusiastic developers do, I of course also read all of the best practices books that I could find when I was starting out, and because I wanted to get as good as I humanly can. And I thought that by just listening to all the things and like reading all the things and trying to really like use all of the best practices, I would get there quicker because like it's just a bunch of rules, right? And it's only now later where I realized that where I understand the difference between the difference between memorizing a rule and understanding the intention of that rule. It's and I see it really did open my eyes when I started to realize this. When I started to realize that these doctrines that I was following of more experienced programmers, that uh, they are true. Like I understand the truth in the words that the more experienced super developers they have really thought this through. It's just that I mean they can't give me all their experience through a book. All they can do is to put out the information there and have me sort of like a child play around with it and misuse it until I also understand what the truth of these words are. And I see this, and after I started understanding this, I actually started seeing other people do this in all facets of life, where you have people who are truly wise, who understand when a rule, what the intention of a rule actually is, or a law, or whatever, and the people who just know the words, like they've just memorized the word, they don't actually reflect all that much, like they haven't understood the intention behind it, and that was something that I struggled with quite a bit in the beginning of things because it's frankly it is fundamental to your ability to work as an effective software developer to understand what a good solution looks like as opposed of just using something someone else has told you to use. This it's to understand that it takes time. You won't be able to understand that in your first years of work. It's not going to happen. It's such a it's such an elusive thing to understand when a solution that is, let's say, something that is really popular, when that is a good solution and when it's not a good solution. To really have that feel, that sixth sense for what good solutions look like and what bad solutions look like, and you won't be able to be an effective software developer without getting a feel for this exact thing. And honestly, I see so many developers struggle with this. Like I've worked with many developers who really they really don't have they don't really have the knack for it. Another thing that was really hard for me, if we go even lower than that, if we go and if we try to be less philosophical, let's talk about something a little bit more concrete. Uh, I was also saying that I had a problem understanding how things fit together, how to structure things, and that took a long time. It took a really long time for me, and at one point in the early days, I was like I was convinced that I was too stupid to do this. I just couldn't get things to work. And the things that I couldn't really fit together was okay, so I have this idea, I want to build this thing here, but I just can't really picture how the flow is going to work. How is I just don't get it. Like, how am I going to take, okay, so there's going to be like a server or something, or there's going to be like this input from the command line, and then I'm going to like use that somehow to create a few numbers or whatever, and then my algorithm is going to do something fancy and spit out some output to the user. And I couldn't really understand how to piece that together and like, okay, what are the steps and how am I going to do this and so forth. The thing that really helped me in the early days, and nowadays I don't really have to do it the same way anymore because I've finally reached a point where I can just do it in my head. It's faster to do it in my head. You don't, I mean, some people I still know who do this, is that they map out the steps. They write pseudocode or they use comments in order to just map out, okay, first I need to do this thing, and then be really clear about what is the expectation of that first step. It's actually one of the philosophies that I really love about functional programming, where at a very high level now, this is not exactly the thing that you might have been hearing, but the philosophy behind the whole thing is to look at your program as a series of transfers and transformations, where okay, you get some input, you pipe that into a function or some logical operation, and that's going to give you some type of output. And armed with that, if you using that mental picture together with the step-by-step type of thing, it makes it at least for me, it made it much clearer what steps are going to happen in my program. Because if everything is a function and it takes an input and it gives me an output, and then I think about every step of the way what I need to do, then I can actually step out my entire process, and it makes it much easier for me to segment like what each step is doing. As an example would be, well, I will when in the early days I got this tip. Okay, start by declaring what you will get into your program, what's going to come in, what you expect, and then what you expect to get out. Start with the end and the start and the finish of your function or whatever you're doing, right? And then start to try to map out, okay, so I get this thing in, and then I need to do this, and put a comment that just describe, okay, what is the next thing that needs to happen? Okay, what is the next thing that needs to happen? And then you work your way down until you get to the end state. And then you try to create functions that basically do that thing. Because let's take a network request as an example. Okay, so I need to, I don't know, update a user. We're going to update the email on a user. All right, and we will start by saying, okay, the thing that I'm going to get in is, okay, I'm going to get in an ID of the user, most likely. And the thing that I expect to return to the client is an updated user, like a user representation of that user. All right, let's start by saying that, okay, a comment stating that network request comes in, I need to get the user with the network request comes in with user ID, get user. And then after that, another comment saying something like update user, or take email, which is also supposed to come in, take the email that we want to update with, and then apply it to the user, save the user to the database, return the updated user, something like that. And then for each of these comments, you simply create a function or some piece of logic that knows how to do that thing, and then you just step it out. It's like baby steps. Okay, so I do this thing first, so I know that I've done that because I need to do that before I can do the next thing. And then I take the next step and I go, okay, now I've done that thing which I need to do before I can do the next thing, and you kind of just step it out. This is also, in my opinion, one of those times where test-driven development really helped. In the early days, I thought test-driven development was the smartest thing ever. I still do, of course, but it was especially useful as a beginner because if I could just write, when you're writing a function or your first pieces of logic, it's really tough to keep because you have all these ideas and thoughts and you don't really know how all this stuff work, and you have to go back and forth between reading documentation and syntax and like all of this other stuff, and it's hard to remember everything. So if you just create a test that tests like a really simple thing, like the comment I was saying, that you get the thing that you expect, well, then you have a test that makes sure that the first assumption in your logic chain is actually true, and then you write the next one and says, all right, I can get a user. Okay, let's write a test for getting a user, and then you create one for you should be able to add a email to this user model or whatever, and then you just step it through. So the unit test becomes a reminder. It becomes a history of all the functionality that you've already finished before you reach the end of your logic. So what I want you to take away from this is that the two main things that I struggled with in the early days as a software developer that are fairly fundamental to being a good software developer is, number one, I didn't really know what best practices were. I didn't really understand how to correctly apply good solutions and so forth, and that is kind of expected, because when you don't know any better, you don't know any better. You have to fuck up, and I think that you should think the same way that I did. Try your best to do the best that you can, but understand that you're learning and you're gonna fuck up. There's no way around it. You're gonna fuck up a lot, but through those fuck ups, you're going to learn to do better. You're going to go from, as I said, from just reading the rules as rules to understanding the intention behind those rules. The second thing that I can give as a tip, which was really hard for me, was to figure out, okay, in what order are things happening? How does everything fit together? And this is where test-driven development can really help you, or add comments, pseudocode, so you just really step it through. Just step through every step of the execution that you're going to do, or your program. Functional programmer has a really nice lesson about that as well. Think of everything as a transformation. You have some input and some output of your function, and you might have a lot of stuff that happens in between, but the same rule always applies. You get this input, you create a function that converts that thing into the next thing, and then you take that thing and put that into another function that converts it to the next thing, and you repeat that process until you reach the end of your program where the expected output is. Have a great day.